Have you ever looked at the person sleeping next to you and believed you knew their heart, their every thought, their every dream? Clara Sterling did. She believed in the life she and her husband Marcus had built, a fortress of love, laughter, and shared ambition. Their baby, a little girl due in 3 months, was to be the final perfect stone set in that fortress. But what happens when you discover the man you trust with your life, your future, and your child's, is telling his friends your shared dream is a cage, that you, his loving wife, are a trapper? This is the story of how one whispered venomous sentence in the supposed privacy of a backyard barbecue didn't just break a heart, it leveled a fortress. And that very night the king of the castle found his throne on the curb. The late afternoon sun of a perfect June Saturday filtered through the sprawling branches of the old oak tree in their backyard, dappling the lawn in shifting patterns of gold. It was the kind of cinematic light that made everything look more beautiful, more meaningful. For Clara Sterling, standing on the precipice of her 3rd trimester, it felt like a blessing from the universe, an affirmation of the perfect life she had so carefully, so lovingly constructed with her husband Marcus. Their home, a meticulously restored 2-story colonial in a quiet, affluent suburb of Boston, was her pride and joy. Clara, an architectural historian by trade, had poured her soul into it. Every polished floorboard, every carefully chosen shade of paint, every antique brass fixture whispered a story of a past reclaimed and a future promised. Today the house was alive, its pristine rooms and manicured garden filled with the laughter and chatter of their closest friends and family. It was their baby shower, or more accurately, a co-ed baby celebration, as Marcus had insisted on calling it. "No stuffy ladies-only tea parties for us, honey," he'd said with that charming lopsided grin that still made her stomach flutter after 6 years of marriage. "We're in this together." And they were. Weren't they? Clara ran a hand over the gentle, firm curve of her belly. Their daughter, whom they had already decided to name Olivia, gave a little kick, a secret hello just for her. A wave of love so fierce it was almost painful washed over Clara. She looked across the lawn, a sea of pastel dresses and crisp linen shirts, and her eyes found Marcus. He was holding court by the state-of-the-art grill he'd been obsessed with for months. He was a master of this domain, flipping gourmet burgers with a practiced flick of the wrist, a cold beer sweating in his other hand. At 34, Marcus was the epitome of success. A senior financial advisor at a prestigious downtown firm, he was handsome, confident, and radiated an effortless magnetism that drew people in. He was telling a story, his voice a low, confident rumble that carried across the yard. His friends, Julian, Patrick, and a few others from his office, were roaring with laughter, captivated. Clara smiled. That was her Marcus. The center of every room, the life of every party. He'd been so wonderfully attentive throughout the pregnancy. He'd accompanied her to every single doctor's appointment, his hand a warm, steady presence on her back. He'd spent hours assembling the crib, cursing the confusing instructions with a theatrical frustration that had made her laugh until she cried. Just last night he'd knelt before her, his head resting on her belly, whispering promises to their unborn daughter about all the adventures they would have. He was going to be the perfect father. They were going to be the perfect family. He's a natural, isn't he? Clara turned to see her best friend Sophie standing beside her holding a glass of sparkling cider. Sophie's eyes, full of a knowing warmth, were also fixed on Marcus. "He really is," Clara agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I just look at him, and I can't believe how lucky I am." "You're not lucky, you're deserving," Sophie corrected gently. "You two built this. It didn't just happen." Sophie was right. Theirs wasn't a whirlwind romance. It had been a slow, deliberate burn. They met through a mutual client, and their initial connection was based on a shared ambition and a mutual respect for each other's careers. The love came later, solid and steady, built on a foundation of late-night talks, shared dreams of travel, and the mutual desire for a life that was both successful and meaningful. He was the ambitious, charismatic risk-taker. She was the thoughtful, steady planner. They balanced each other. They made sense. The proposal a year ago on a trip to Nantucket had felt less like a question and more like a foregone conclusion, the logical, beautiful next step. The pregnancy, however, had been a surprise. A happy one, they'd both insisted. They had planned to start trying in a year or so after a planned promotion for him and the completion of a major restoration project for her. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Clara had been nervous to tell him, worried it was too soon, that it would derail their carefully laid timeline. She'd presented him with the positive test on a Tuesday morning, her hands trembling. He had stared at the little plastic stick for a long moment, his face unreadable. Clara's heart had hammered against her ribs, and then his face had broken into that brilliant, all-encompassing smile. He'd lifted her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. A baby, he'd yelled, his voice echoing in their sun-filled breakfast nook. "We're having a baby! This is incredible! Who cares about timelines? Our timeline starts now." His unadulterated joy had washed away all her fears. From that moment on, he'd been her rock, her biggest cheerleader. He called the baby their beautiful little detour. The party was winding down as the afternoon bled into a warm evening. The older relatives had departed, leaving a core group of their closest friends. The soft glow of string lights Marcus had hung from the oak tree replaced the fading sun. Clara, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back, decided to slip inside to use the bathroom and put her feet up for a moment. The sliding glass door to the dining room was slightly ajar to let in the breeze. As she moved past it, she heard Marcus's voice closer now. He and his group had moved from the grill to the patio furniture just outside the door. She paused, a soft smile on her face, intending to listen for a moment before surprising them. Julian's voice, always a little too loud, a little too slick, cut through the low murmur. "Seriously, man, I don't know how you do it. A mortgage that could choke a horse, a baby on the way. You're a real-life grown-up." There was a round of appreciative chuckles. Clara heard the sound of a bottle cap being twisted off. It was Marcus's voice that followed, but it was a different Marcus. The tone was off. Gone was the warm, confident rumble. This was something else, a weary, cynical drawl she'd never heard before. "Tell me about it," Marcus said, his voice heavy. "Nah, but you wanted this right," Patrick chimed in. "You guys are the perfect couple. Everyone says so." There was a pause. A beat of silence that felt unnaturally long. Clara held her breath, an inexplicable knot of dread tightening in her chest. And then Marcus spoke the words that would detonate her world. "Wanted is a strong word, man," he said, followed by a short, bitter laugh that sounded like tearing metal. "Let's be honest. She's smart. She knew my promotion was coming. She knew my stock options were vesting. The timing was just a little too perfect, you know. She trapped me with this pregnancy. Plain and simple. What was I supposed to do? Run for the hills? My parents would disown me. Her family would crucify me. So you play the part. You smile, you rub the belly, you build the damn crib." The world went silent. The chirping of the crickets, the distant hum of traffic, the soft music still playing from the outdoor speakers, it all vanished. The only sound was a roaring in Clara's ears, like the ocean trying to drown her. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp that felt like it was being ripped from her lungs. Her other hand instinctively went to her belly, a protective shield against a blow she hadn't seen coming. Trapped me. The two words echoed in the sudden cavernous emptiness of her mind. They were ugly, jagged things. They didn't fit in her beautiful house with her beautiful life with her loving husband. Julian let out a low whistle. "Damn, dude. That's cold. I mean, I always thought you guys were solid." "We're an image, Julian." "That's what we are." Marcus's voice continued, laced with a venomous self-pity that made Clara's stomach churn with nausea. "I'm playing a role. The devoted husband, the excited father-to-be. It's a life sentence. But hey," he added, his voice lifting with a false, forced bravado, "at least the cell is comfortable, right?" The men laughed. It wasn't the full-throated, joyous laughter from before. It was a strained, uncomfortable sound. The sound of men complicit in a casual, cruel betrayal. Clara couldn't move. She was frozen, rooted to the spot on the cool hardwood floor just inside the door. Her meticulously restored home suddenly felt like a stage set, the walls flimsy and fake. The love she thought was the foundation of her life was a script he was reading from. Every tender touch, every whispered promise, every shared smile over the past 7 months replayed in her mind, now tainted, twisted into a grotesque parody of affection. The man who had knelt at her belly whispering to their daughter was an actor, and she, the loving wife, was his unwitting audience and his jailer. The knot of dread in her chest had blossomed into a full-blown, suffocating agony. It was a physical pain, sharp and breathtaking. She felt the kick again, Olivia's tiny foot against her ribs, but this time it wasn't a secret hello. It was a terrified flutter, a question. Slowly, mechanically, Clara backed away from the door. Her legs felt like lead, her body a stranger's. She crept up the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth, polished banister that Marcus had spent a weekend sanding and staining. A monument to a lie. She reached their bedroom, their sanctuary, and closed the door without a sound. She stood in the middle of the room, her gaze sweeping over the life they had shared. The king-sized bed with its crisp white duvet. The framed photos on the dresser, them on their wedding day, laughing in Nantucket, smiling at a Christmas party. All of it a lie. A performance. She trapped me. The words wouldn't leave. They curled around her heart, squeezing until she thought it might burst. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a wave of cold, clear fury. It was an anger so pure and so potent, it burned away the tears that threatened to fall. He hadn't just insulted her. He had nullified her. He had taken their shared life, their love, their unborn child, and reduced it to a business calculation, a trap he had begrudgingly walked into. He had performed his love for her in front of their friends, their families, and worst of all, in front of her. He felt trapped. Fine. She would set him free. Her eyes landed on his walk-in closet. A small, grim smile touched her lips for the first time. It felt alien on her face. With a deep, shuddering breath, she walked towards it. The performance was over. The curtain was coming down. And when the star of the show came looking for his comfortable cell tonight, he'd find the door locked and his worldly possessions on the lawn. The fury was a furnace inside Clara, burning away the shock and leaving behind a brittle, resolute calm. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Crying was for victims, for the heartbroken. Right now she wasn't heartbroken. She was hollowed out, and a warrior was building a fortress in the empty space. Her movements were deliberate, almost robotic, as she entered his walk-in closet. The scent of his cologne, a sharp, woody fragrance she had once loved, hung in the air, a phantom of the man she thought he was. It was nauseating. She grabbed the first thing she saw, a stack of large black trash bags from the pantry she'd just restocked. They felt fittingly disrespectful. She started with his suits, dozens of them. Tom Ford, Armani, Zegna. Each one represented a milestone she had celebrated with him, a promotion, a major client landed, a year-end bonus. She remembered helping him pick out the charcoal gray one for their first anniversary dinner. He'd modeled it for her in the store, and she'd felt a surge of pride at how handsome and successful her husband was. Now she saw it for what it was, a costume. She pulled it from its wooden hanger, the expensive fabric wrinkling in her fist, and shoved it into the black bag. It was followed by the navy pinstripe, the slate blue, the classic black. She didn't fold them. She stuffed them, an act of methodical desecration. Next came the shirts, a rainbow of crisp cotton and silk blends, all professionally laundered and pressed. She swept an arm across the rod, sending a cascade of them to the floor. She bundled them up, the pale blue one he wore on their first date, the white one from their wedding day that he'd insisted on keeping, and crammed them into another bag. With every item a memory surfaced, sharp and painful, and with every shove into the bag she banished it. This was an exorcism. His shoes were lined up on custom-built shelves. Polished Oxford's casual loafers, expensive running sneakers he'd worn maybe twice. She grabbed them by the handful, the heavy leather thudding unceremoniously into the plastic. The golf clubs he cherished, the ones she'd bought him for his 30th birthday, were propped in the corner. She dragged the heavy bag out, its metal contents clanking like a death knell. She worked with a feverish intensity, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The physical exertion was a welcome distraction from the cyclone in her mind. Trap me. A life sentence. Playing a role. The words were a relentless drumbeat against her skull. She moved from the closet to the bedroom. His bedside table was next. A half-read biography of some tech billionaire, a leather watch box, a framed photo of the two of them grinning on a ski lift in Vail. She paused, her hand hovering over the photo. His arm was around her, his smile wide and seemingly genuine. Her own smile was radiant, her cheeks flushed from the cold and happiness. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a picture of two strangers. With a flick of her wrist, she turned it face down on the table. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away, not yet, but she couldn't bear to look at it either. She swept the contents of the table, the book, the watch box, his wallet, and his keys into a smaller canvas tote bag. The bathroom. His electric toothbrush, his overpriced face wash, his entire pharmacopoeia of products that promised youth and vitality. All of it went into another bag. She worked her way through the house, a silent, methodical storm of banishment. The laptop on his desk in the study, the collection of rare bourbons he displayed on the bar cart, the stack of financial magazines by his favorite armchair, anything that was uniquely, unequivocally his. By the time she was done, nearly 2 hours had passed. The sun had long set and the party guests were gone. She stood in the foyer, surrounded by a mountain of black plastic bags and a few boxes of his more fragile belongings. Her back screamed in protest, and a deep, bone-weary exhaustion was beginning to set in. But she wasn't finished. With a grunt of effort, she dragged the first bag to the front door. It was heavy, heavier than she expected. She hauled it across the threshold and onto the perfectly manicured lawn, its pristine green surface now marred by the ugly black plastic. Back and forth she went, a grim procession of one. Each trip was a step away from the life she had known. With each bag that landed on the grass, she felt a small piece of the crushing weight on her chest lift. She was dismantling their life piece by piece and reclaiming the space for herself. The final item was the golf bag. She dragged it to the front door and gave it a final mighty shove. It toppled onto the lawn with a loud metallic clatter that echoed in the quiet suburban night. There. Done. She stood on her front porch, breathing heavily in the cool night air. The lawn looked like a disaster zone, a public shaming, a monument to his betrayal. A small, fierce part of her hoped the neighbors were watching. Let them see. Let the whole world see the truth behind the perfect facade of the Sterling family. She went back inside and locked the door, sliding the deadbolt and fastening the chain. She walked through the now unfamiliar rooms of her house. They felt larger, emptier. The air was different. The silence was absolute. There was no ghost of his presence left. She had purged him. Clara made her way to the kitchen and poured herself a tall glass of ice water, her hand shaking slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a vast, trembling emptiness in its wake. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd spun her around in joy over the positive pregnancy test. A single hot tear finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. It was followed by another and another. She didn't sob. It was a quiet, desolate weeping, a silent acknowledgement of the sheer, devastating magnitude of her loss. She wasn't just mourning a marriage. She was mourning the reality she had believed in. An hour later, maybe more, she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. He was home. Her tears stopped instantly. The warrior was back, standing guard. She stood up, wiped her face, and walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. She saw Marcus get out of his car. He was whistling a jaunty, carefree tune. He walked towards the front porch, then stopped dead in his tracks. In the glow of the porch light, she could see his silhouette freeze. He looked at the mountain of his belongings on the lawn, his head tilting in confusion like a dog seeing a strange object in its path. He looked from the bags to the front door and back again. He took a few hesitant steps forward, then stopped. Then came the sound she was waiting for, the jingle of his keys. He tried his key in the lock. It turned, but the deadbolt held fast. He tried again, jiggling it with more force. Nothing. "Clara," he called out, his voice laced with confusion. "Honey, the door's stuck." Clara remained silent, her back pressed against the cool wood of the door, her heart hammering a steady, defiant rhythm. "Clara, come on, open up," he said, his tone shifting from confusion to irritation. He knocked a sharp, impatient rap. "What's going on? What is all this stuff on the lawn? Is this some kind of joke?" She took a deep, steadying breath. "It's not a joke, Marcus," she said, her voice surprisingly strong and clear, carrying easily through the thick wood of the door. There was a moment of silence from the other side. "Clara, what the hell is going on? Why are my suits on the grass? Open the door." He rattled the doorknob again, a frantic, angry sound. "No," she said simply. "What do you mean, no?" He practically yelled, his voice rising in disbelief and fury. "It's my house. Open the goddamn door." "You're right," Clara said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. "It was your house. It was your comfortable cell." The silence that followed was absolute. She could almost feel his blood run cold on the other side of the door. She had thrown his own words back at him, and she knew they had hit their mark. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered, all the bluster gone, replaced by a dawning horror. "I think you know," she replied. "I heard you, Marcus, in the backyard, talking to Julian and the others." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I heard everything. About how I trapped you. About your life sentence. About what a great actor you are." "Clara, honey, you misunderstood," he began, his voice desperate, pleading. "We were just talking, just guy talk. It was stupid. The beer, I didn't mean any of it. You have to believe me." "Oh, I believe you," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "I believe that was the first time I've heard you speak the truth in months. The performance is over. You're free now, Marcus. Your sentence has been commuted." "Clara, please. It's not true. I love you. I love this baby," he cried, his palm hitting the door. "Let me in. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, her resolve hardening with every pathetic plea he uttered. "You have your clothes, your golf clubs, your precious bourbon, everything you need. Find another cell to occupy tonight. This one is no longer available." "You can't do this!" he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "Clara, I'm your husband." "No," she said, her final word on the matter. "You were the man I was married to. He's gone. And the man who is standing on my porch right now is a stranger I want nowhere near me or my child." She turned away from the door and walked back towards the heart of the house, her house. His shouting continued for a while, a desperate, furious tirade that devolved into pleading and then eventually into silence. She didn't listen. She was already making a new plan, building a new fortress. This time, the walls would be hers alone, and they would be impenetrable. The first night alone was a war fought in silence. Every creak of the old house, every sigh of the wind outside the window sounded like an accusation. Clara lay awake in the center of the vast, king-sized bed, a territory that now felt too large, too empty. She didn't cry. The rage from the evening had cooled into a solid, heavy block of ice in her stomach. Sleep was impossible. Instead, she lay staring into the darkness, her mind a relentless engine of reassessment. She replayed every moment of their life together, viewing it through the new, brutal lens of his betrayal. Their wedding vows, his eloquent promises of fidelity and partnership, now sounded like a masterfully delivered monologue. The expensive gifts, the grand romantic gestures were they acts of love or payments to assuage his guilt. The attentive husband at her obstetrician appointments, was he there for her, or was he playing a part for the doctor, for society, for the perfect couple narrative? The most agonizing part was the realization that the man she loved likely never existed. He was a construct, a character Marcus played. And the terrible, galling truth was that he was a brilliant actor. He had fooled everyone, including her. The humiliation of it was a fresh wound stinging more than the initial betrayal. As dawn broke, painting the bedroom ceiling in pale, indifferent shades of gray, Clara knew that sorrow was a luxury that would lead to paralysis. She needed action. She needed information. His words, "She knew my promotion was coming, she knew my stock options were vesting," kept looping in her head. He had reduced her love, their child, to a financial calculation. Fine. She would start with the finances. Marcus had always handled their money. He was the expert, after all. "Don't you worry your pretty head about it," he'd say with a patronizing pat on her arm whenever she asked about investments or savings. "I've got us covered." She had trusted him implicitly, content to focus on her own career and their home. Now that trust felt like a staggering naivety. After forcing down a piece of dry toast and a glass of milk for the baby's sake, Clara went into the study. The room already felt different without his clutter. She sat down at his large mahogany desk, powered on his laptop, which he'd ironically left behind, and took a deep breath. She had always known the password. It was a combination of their anniversary and the name of their favorite Nantucket beach, another little detail that now felt like a sick joke. She had online access to all their joint accounts. She started with their primary checking account. The balance was lower than she expected, significantly lower for the week after a major bonus payout. She scrolled through the recent transactions. Mortgage payment, car payments, credit card bills, all standard. But then she saw it, a wire transfer made 2 days before the party. A single transfer for $50,000. Her breath caught in her throat. $50,000. It was a staggering amount to move without discussion. The recipient was listed simply as VR Investments, LLC. She had never heard of it. It wasn't one of the standard investment firms he used for their portfolio. This was something different, something hidden. Her heart began to pound, a frantic, nervous rhythm. This was more than just a stray comment at a party. This was tangible. This was a secret. She dug deeper, opening the statements for their joint savings account, an account she believed held a substantial six-figure nest egg for their future for Olivia. It was nearly empty. Statement after statement showed large systematic withdrawals over the past 18 months, all transferred to the same VR Investments, LLC. A cold dread entirely different from the hot fury of the night before seeped into her bones. This wasn't mismanagement. This wasn't a bad investment. This felt like a deliberate draining of their shared resources. Over $200,000 of their savings gone. Her hands were trembling as she opened the online portal for his latest bonus and stock option vesting. He had told her it was a massive windfall, the thing that would set them up for years. The documents confirmed the amount was even larger than he'd let on. But a significant portion of the cash bonus, the part that should have been deposited into their checking account, was missing. Diverted. She felt a wave of dizziness and leaned back in the chair, placing a hand on her belly. The baby was quiet, as if sensing her mother's distress. "What did you do, Marcus? Where did all our money go?" Her phone buzzed on the desk, a text from him. "Clara, I'm at a hotel. I'm a wreck. Please, can we just talk? I can explain everything. I love you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Explain what she thought. Explain how you systematically liquidated our future. She ignored the text and dozens more that followed, each one more desperate than the last. She ignored the missed calls from his number, from his mother, from Julian. They were all part of his world, a world that had proven to be a fiction. She had only one person she could trust. She called Sophie. "Clara. Oh my God, I was so worried. Marcus's mom called me frantic. She said he called her from a hotel saying you threw him out. What on earth is going on?" Clara took a shaky breath, the dam of her composure finally cracking at the sound of her friend's concerned voice. "He's a liar. Soph." She whispered the words, choked with a pain she could no longer suppress. Everything was a lie. She told her everything. The words he'd said in the backyard, the coldness in his voice, the casual cruelty of it all. She told her about packing his bags, the confrontation at the door, and her discoveries that morning. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Clara," Sophie finally said, her voice full of horrified empathy. That bastard. That absolute bastard." She didn't offer platitudes or tell Clara she had misunderstood. She believed her. That unwavering belief was a balm on Clara's raw nerves. And the money VR investments. "What is that?" "I have no idea," Clara admitted, her voice trembling. "Some shell company maybe. I feel so stupid, Sophie. I just let him handle everything. I never questioned it." "Don't you dare blame yourself," Sophie said fiercely. "You're not stupid, you're trusting. That's what people in a marriage are supposed to be. He's the one who broke that trust, not you. Listen to me. Do not talk to him. Do not let him in. You need a lawyer and you need a forensic accountant. Right now." Sophie was right. This was beyond working things out. This was a calculated deception that bordered on criminal. Sophie, ever practical, gave her the name of a top-tier divorce attorney in Boston, a woman known for being a shark in Chanel. Clara called and made an appointment for the following morning. The rest of the day was a blur of activity, a defense mechanism against the encroaching despair. Clara changed the locks on all the doors. A locksmith came within the hour, a quiet, efficient man who didn't ask any questions as he replaced the deadbolts on the front, back, and garage doors. The sound of the drill was immensely satisfying, each turn of the screw another layer of security, another definitive severing. She then called her bank and her credit card companies. She explained in calm, measured tones that she was separating from her husband and that she believed their joint assets had been compromised. She froze the remaining funds in the checking account and had his name removed from her personal credit cards. Each call was an act of reclamation, of taking back control. The texts from Marcus continued, a barrage of digital begging. "Clara, please answer me. I'm falling apart. My mom is worried sick. Can you at least tell her you're okay? I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. Just don't do this." His pleas were like water off a duck's back. The man pleading for forgiveness was the same man who had systematically drained their savings. The man who claimed to be falling apart was the same man who had laughed with his friends about his life sentence. His words were meaningless now, just noise. Late in the afternoon, there was a knock at the new locked door. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. She crept to the peephole and saw Julian standing on her porch, looking uncomfortable and holding what looked like a peace offering, a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower. The gesture was so transparently manipulative it made her sick. He was Marcus's envoy, his accomplice. She didn't open the door. She simply watched as he knocked again, called her name a few times, and finally left the flowers on the porch swing, a funereal tribute to a dead marriage. She left them there to wilt in the afternoon sun. That evening, as she sat alone in the deafening silence of her pristine, purged home, Clara felt a profound shift within herself. The grief was still there, a deep, resonant ache. But something else was growing alongside it, a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. He hadn't just betrayed her emotionally. He had jeopardized her future and the future of their child. He thought she had trapped him. He had no idea what a cornered woman fighting for her child was capable of. The unraveling had just begun, and she would pull on every last thread until his entire web of lies came undone. The law office of Ms. Evelyn Reed was exactly what Clara needed it to be: cool, intimidating, and utterly devoid of sentiment. The furniture was modern and sharp-edged, the art on the walls abstract and expensive. Evelyn Reed herself was in her late 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut in a severe, stylish bob and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She listened to Clara's story without interruption, her fingers steepled under her chin. When Clara finished, her voice hoarse from recounting the entire sordid tale, Evelyn nodded slowly. "Mr. Sterling has made a series of catastrophic errors," she said, her voice as crisp as a new $100 bill. The emotional component, the infidelity of the heart, the public humiliation is grounds enough for a painful divorce. But this financial situation, she leaned forward, a predator catching the scent of blood. This is where we got him. Evelyn's bluntness was a strange comfort. She laid out a plan with chilling efficiency. They would file for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences, and simultaneously file an emergency motion to freeze all known assets, both personal and marital, pending a full financial disclosure. She introduced Clara to a forensic accountant named David Chen, a quiet man with glasses who looked more like a librarian than a financial detective. For the next week, Clara's life revolved around David. They sat together in her dining room, which had been converted into a war room, surrounded by piles of documents she had gathered: bank statements, tax returns from the past 7 years, mortgage documents, investment portfolios. David worked with a quiet, relentless focus, inputting numbers into complex spreadsheets and tracing the flow of money with a digital highlighter. "Your husband was both arrogant and sloppy," David remarked on the third day, peering at his laptop screen. "He used the same limited liability company, VR Investments, for every transfer. He likely thought that because he controlled all the accounts you'd never look. The arrogance of the deceiver." The name of that LLC haunted Clara. VR Investments. What did VR stand for? The question gnawed at her during the long, sleepless nights. It felt personal. It felt like a key. Marcus wasn't creative enough for a random name. It had to mean something. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. While cleaning out the last vestiges of Marcus's presence from the home office, Clara found a box of old college memorabilia tucked away in the back of a closet. Yearbooks, fraternity paddles, photo albums. She almost threw the whole box out, but some instinct made her pause. She sat on the floor and began to sift through the life of a younger Marcus, a person she had only known through his own edited stories. There he was, 20 years old, with more hair and a less polished smile, arm in arm with his fraternity brothers. And then she saw her. In picture after picture from his junior and senior years, there was a striking dark-haired girl. She was always near him, her expression intense, proprietary. In one photo they were kissing at a formal, his hand possessively on her waist. The caption underneath, written in faded silver ink, read, "Mark and Ronnie, King and Queen of the Winter Ball." Ronnie. Clara's blood ran cold. She flipped through the pages of his senior yearbook, her fingers clumsy with dread. She found the girl's official portrait in the student section. Her name was Veronica Reed. VR. It couldn't be a coincidence. Veronica Reed. VR Investments. A quick, frantic search on social media confirmed it. Veronica Reed now. Veronica Reed Allister, after a short-lived marriage, was the CEO and founder of a boutique real estate development firm in Chicago. The firm's name, VRA Properties. But her personal investment arm, the one she used for side projects, was a registered LLC, VR Investments. The pieces slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. Clara felt the air leave her lungs, and she had to grip the edge of the desk to steady herself. This wasn't just financial malfeasance. This wasn't an abstract, faceless crime. He had been siphoning their shared future, the money for their child, their security, and sending it to his college girlfriend. The betrayal was so profound, so layered, it was almost incomprehensible. The trap, he felt, wasn't just the baby. It was the life he had built with Clara, a life that was apparently preventing him from being with Veronica. Clara fell into a rabbit hole of online investigation. She found articles about Veronica's firm. She'd had early success, but had recently been plagued by a series of high-profile failures. A luxury condo development that had stalled mid-construction, a commercial project mired in zoning disputes. The timelines of these failures correlated perfectly with the large withdrawals from Clara and Marcus's savings. He hadn't been investing in Veronica's company. He had been bailing her out. He had been propping up his ex-girlfriend's failing business with their family's money. The $50,000 transfer just before the party was likely a desperate last-ditch infusion to stave off a creditor or make payroll. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had complained about feeling trapped by Clara and their baby while actively funding the life and career of another woman. a woman from his past he had never once mentioned. Clara had asked him about serious past relationships once years ago. "No one worth mentioning," he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "My life didn't start until I met you." Another lie, perhaps the most insidious of them all. When she presented her findings to Evelyn and David, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy. David Chen let out a long, low whistle. "This changes things," he said, looking at Evelyn. "This isn't just hiding assets. This is fraudulent conveyance. He was moving marital property with the intent to defraud his spouse, likely in collusion with the recipient." Evelyn's expression was grimly triumphant. "Well, Veronica Reed is about to have a very bad day," she said. "We're adding her to the suit. We'll subpoena her business records, her personal financials. We will prove collusion. We won't just get the money back, Clara. We will get damages." The legal machinery moved with terrifying speed. Subpoenas were issued. Veronica Reed Allister, CEO, was suddenly dragged into the messy public implosion of her ex-boyfriend's marriage. It was then that Marcus's tactics shifted. The pleading texts and calls stopped. In their place came a cold, threatening email from a lawyer Clara had never heard of. It was full of blustering legal threats accusing her of slander, of illegal seizure of property, his bags on the lawn, and demanding she cease all contact with third parties related to their finances. It was a scare tactic, and a clumsy one. Evelyn Reed laughed out loud when Clara forwarded it to her. "He's terrified," she said with satisfaction. "He knows you found her. He knows the game is up." But the true depth of the betrayal was yet to be revealed. A week later, David Chen called Clara. His voice was different, hesitant. "Clara, I found something else," he said. "In the credit card statements from 2 years ago, I was looking for patterns and I found one. A recurring charge for a hotel in Chicago. The Langham always for a weekend. And airline tickets to Chicago booked for one person, Marcus. It happened 4 times over a 6-month period." Clara felt her stomach drop. "The dates of those trips," David continued gently, "they coincide with business trips he was supposed to be taking to a conference in Denver." Clara remembered those trips. He'd called her every night telling her how boring the conference was, how much he missed her. All the while he was in a different city in a luxury hotel with Veronica. But David wasn't finished. "There's one more thing. I cross-referenced the hotel charges with Veronica Reed's social media. On one of those weekends she posted a photo from a hotel balcony. The view is unmistakably from a suite at the Langham. The caption read, 'Sometimes the past comes back in the best way possible.'" There it was. The final devastating piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just money. It was a full-blown affair, a long-term calculated deception. He hadn't just been financially supporting his ex. He had been sleeping with her. He had been living a double life. Clara hung up the phone. She walked slowly into the nursery, the one room in the house that was purely hers, purely for Olivia. The walls were a soft, calming shade of lavender. The crib he had assembled stood against the wall. She ran her hand over the smooth white wood. The man who had built this crib, who had pretended to curse at the instructions to make her laugh, had done so while actively cheating on her. The lie wasn't just about feeling trapped by the pregnancy. The lie was everything. He had been cheating on her, stealing from her, and all the while playing the part of the perfect husband. The pregnancy hadn't trapped him. It had simply inconvenienced his affair. It had forced a choice, and his resentment had boiled over in that one unguarded moment in the backyard. She looked at the crib, at the symbol of the future she thought they were building together. With a surge of newfound strength, she began to take it apart. She didn't have the instruction manual, but she didn't need one. She would figure it out herself. She would deconstruct every last piece of the life he had touched, and she would rebuild a new one from scratch on her own terms, on a foundation of truth. The legal subpoenas sent a shockwave through Marcus's carefully constructed world. The threat of having his ex-girlfriend and business partner Veronica deposed and her company's finances laid bare was a risk he couldn't take. The panic was palpable, culminating in a single desperate email sent directly to Clara, bypassing the lawyers. Subject: "Please, Clara, I know you won't talk to me. I know what you must think, but you don't have the whole story. Can we please meet just once? No lawyers, just you and me. I need to explain, for Olivia's sake. The manipulative use of their daughter's name was a low blow, but it served a purpose. Clara wanted closure. She needed to look him in the eye armed with the full truth and see the man he was without his masks. She agreed to meet at a sterile downtown coffee shop, a neutral public space where his dramatics would be neutered. She arrived first, a portrait of calm resolve in a simple black maternity dress. When Marcus entered, he was a ghost of his former self. His suit was ill-fitting on his thinner frame and dark circles were carved under his eyes. He looked haunted. "Clara," he breathed, starting to move towards her. She held up a hand, a simple gesture that stopped him cold. He sank into the opposite chair. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I have 10 minutes, Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "You invoked our daughter's name. Start talking." The script he'd prepared for a tearful, forgiving wife was useless against this steely woman. "Okay," he stammered. "The party. What I said. It was just fear and pressure and too much beer talking. It wasn't the truth. I was terrified of not being a good father. I love you both more than anything." It was a decent performance, but Clara was no longer his audience. "And the money?" she asked, her voice quiet and sharp. "Was our entire life savings wired to VR investments also just beer talk?" He visibly paled. "That's what I have to explain. Ronnie was in trouble. Her business was failing. It was a loan, Clara. Just a loan. I was going to get it all back." "A loan?" Clara repeated the word with disbelief. "You call secretly liquidating our future to bail out your ex-girlfriend a loan?" "She was a friend. She was desperate," he pleaded. "And was the affair a loan too, Marcus?" Clara leaned forward, her eyes like chips of ice. "The trips to Chicago when you were supposed to be in Denver. The suites at the Langham. Her social media post about the past coming back in the best way possible." It was a kill shot. The last of his defenses crumbled. He stared at her, his jaw slack. The arrogant financier and charming husband replaced by a hollowed-out shell of a man. All the lies, all the deceptions were laid bare on the table between them. He finally broke, slumping in his chair and covering his face. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sob, but the quiet, ugly collapse of a man utterly exposed. "It was a mistake," he mumbled from behind his hands. "It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," Clara corrected him, her voice resonating with a final, chilling authority. "It meant our marriage was a fraud. You stood by me and listened to our daughter's heartbeat while you were cheating on me and stealing from us. The pregnancy didn't trap you, Marcus. It just inconvenienced your affair." She pushed her chair back and stood, her presence commanding the small space. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. "Clara, please. I can fix this. I'll get the money back. Don't take my daughter away from me." Clara looked down at the broken man she once loved. There was no hate left, only a vast emptiness where her love used to be. "She is not your daughter to be taken," Clara stated. "She is my daughter. I will spend my life making sure she is surrounded by truth and integrity, things you know nothing about. You will have whatever access the law deems appropriate, and you will provide for her financially. But you and I are finished." Without a backward glance, she walked out of the coffee shop, not with the heavy heart of a victim, but with the steady stride of a survivor. 2 months later, the divorce was nearly final and the house was sold. Faced with irrefutable proof of collusion and fraud, Marcus and Veronica had settled quickly, returning every dollar plus damages, which now sat in a trust for Olivia. Clara stood in the empty living room of the house that was once her dream, ready to move into a new apartment that was hers alone. The old life had been stripped down to the studs, but the foundation underneath was solid. It was hers. A powerful kick from within reminded her she wasn't alone. She placed a hand on her belly and smiled, a real radiant smile. "It's just us, little one," she whispered. "Let's go build something beautiful." That night, when Clara Sterling put her husband's life in trash bags on the front lawn, she wasn't just ending a marriage. She was refusing to be a supporting character in the tragedy he was writing. She chose to become the author of her own story. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. It's a powerful, gut-wrenching reminder that the deepest betrayals often come disguised as love, and that true strength isn't about holding on, but about knowing when and how to let go. Clara's journey through the wreckage of her perfect life to find a stronger, truer version of herself on the other side is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human heart. What would you have done in her shoes? Have you ever had a moment where you realized the person you trusted most was a stranger? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your experience could be the lifeline someone else needs to hear. Don't forget to like this video if Clara's story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength and subscribe for more real-life dramas that empower and inspire.